Catherine Williams stood at her kitchen window, watching the first snowflakes of December dance across the gray London sky. Her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, steam rising like gentle prayers into the cold morning air. The house felt unusually quiet without the children's laughter echoing through the halls. William had taken George, Charlotte, and Louis to their riding lessons early, giving her these precious moments of solitude she rarely experienced. At 39, Catherine had learned to treasure these stolen minutes of peace. Her life had become a carefully choreographed dance of royal duties, family responsibilities, and public appearances. Every smile was photographed, every gesture analyzed, every word scrutinized by millions around the world. Yet beneath the polished exterior of the Princess of Wales lived a woman who still felt the weight of ordinary human emotions, the same fears and hopes that touched every mother's heart. The kitchen, her favorite room in Adelaide Cottage, remained her sanctuary. Here, surrounded by children's artwork stuck to the refrigerator and the lingering scent of yesterday's baking, she could almost forget about the cameras and protocols that governed her public life. The copper pots gleamed softly in the morning light, and fresh herbs from her garden sat in small clay pots on the windowsill, a reminder of the simple pleasures that grounded her. Her phone buzzed against the marble countertop, pulling her from her reverie. A text from her private secretary reminded her of the day's schedule. A visit to the children's hospital, followed by the Christmas carol service planning meeting, and then the evening's charity gala. Each event mattered deeply to her, but lately she found herself yearning for something more meaningful, something that could bridge the growing gap she sensed between the royal family and the people they served. Catherine had always been acutely aware of her unique position. She hadn't been born into royalty like William, hadn't grown up understanding the weight of the crown from childhood. Her journey from a middle-class family in Berkshire to becoming the future queen consort had been extraordinary, filled with moments of doubt and discovery. This outsider's perspective had become one of her greatest strengths, allowing her to see the monarchy through the eyes of ordinary people. The morning news played softly on the television mounted in the corner of the kitchen. Economic uncertainty dominated the headlines. Families struggling with rising costs, communities feeling disconnected in an increasingly digital world. Catherine listened with growing concern as reporters discussed the challenges facing British families during what should be the most joyful time of year. The statistics were sobering. Food bank usage at record highs, mental health services overwhelmed, and a palpable sense of division in communities that once stood united. She thought about her own childhood Christmases in Bucklebury, where her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, had created magic on modest means. The memories flooded back, helping her mother prepare the Christmas pudding, the excitement of Christmas morning with her siblings Pippa and James, the simple joy of being together as a family. Those experiences had shaped her understanding of what truly mattered during the holiday season. William returned home with the children as Catherine was preparing their lunch. The sound of their voices filled the house with warmth and energy. George, now 10, burst through the door first, his cheeks red from the cold, excitedly describing his jumping lesson. Charlotte followed, more composed, but equally animated, while 5-year-old Louis tumbled in behind them, his coat askew and his shoes somehow already untied. "Mummy, Mummy," Louis called out, running directly into Catherine's arms. She lifted him easily, breathing in the scent of fresh air and childhood that clung to his hair. These moments reminded her why everything else mattered. Her children were her anchor, keeping her connected to the fundamental truths of love, family, and the future she was helping to shape. William kissed her cheek, his eyes holding that familiar mixture of love and understanding that had sustained them through 13 years of marriage. He knew, without words, that she had been thinking again about their role, their responsibility to something greater than themselves. They had talked many times about the changing nature of monarchy, the need to remain relevant and connected to the people they served. During lunch, As the children chattered about their friends and their Christmas wishes, Catherine found herself really listening to their words. George mentioned a classmate whose family couldn't afford Christmas presents this year. Charlotte talked about a girl in her class whose grandmother lived alone and never had visitors. Louis, in his innocent way, asked why some children didn't have enough food when there seemed to be so much in their house. Their questions pierced her heart with their simplicity and truth. Here were her children, raised in privilege, but somehow understanding that not everyone shared the good fortune. She realized that this awareness, this natural empathy, was perhaps the most important lesson she could ever teach them about their future roles. After lunch, while the children played in the garden under William's watchful eye, Catherine retreated to her study. The room was lined with books, many focusing on child development, mental health, and social issues. Her university degree in art history seemed like a lifetime ago now, replaced by a passionate self-education in the subjects that would define her royal work. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, a gift from her mother years ago that had become her thinking space. Her handwriting filled page after page with observations, ideas, and dreams for how she might use her platform more effectively. Today, she wrote about the disconnect she felt between the royal family's Christmas message and the realities facing ordinary families. Traditional royal Christmas broadcasts had always followed a familiar formula: gratitude for the year past, acknowledgement of challenges, and hopes for the future. But Catherine wondered if there was a way to make the message more personal, more immediate, more genuinely helpful to those who would hear it. She thought about the power of vulnerability, about the strength that could come from sharing authentic emotion rather than maintaining perfect composure. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Catherine answered with genuine pleasure. Carol Middleton's warm voice immediately made her feel more grounded, more connected to her roots. "Hello, darling," her mother said. "I was just thinking about you and wondering how you're feeling about Christmas this year." The question, so simple and direct, opened something in Catherine's heart. She found herself sharing her thoughts about the struggles she saw in communities across Britain, her desire to create something meaningful that could truly help families during difficult times. Carol listened with the wisdom of a mother who had raised 3 children to be kind, thoughtful adults despite their later prominence. "You know, Catherine," she said gently, "the most powerful thing you can do is simply be honest about your own heart. People don't need perfection from you. They need to see that you understand their lives, that you care about the same things they do." These words resonated deeply with Catherine. She had spent years learning to navigate royal protocol, to represent the crown with dignity and grace. But perhaps what people needed most was not another perfectly polished performance, but a genuine connection with someone who understood the universal experiences of love, loss, hope, and family. After ending the call, Catherine walked through her home, really seeing it with fresh eyes. The Christmas decorations the children had made, the photos covering every surface showing family moments, both formal and candid, the evidence everywhere of a life lived with love and purpose. She realized that her greatest strength lay not in her royal title, but in her identity as a wife, mother, and daughter who happened to hold a unique platform. That evening, as she tucked each child into bed, Catherine found herself paying special attention to their bedtime conversations. George asked about Christmas traditions and why some families celebrated differently. Charlotte wondered about children who didn't have families to read them bedtime stories. Louis, sleepy but thoughtful, asked if they could make Christmas special for other children too. Their questions confirmed what had been growing in her heart all day. Christmas wasn't about perfect presentations or maintaining traditions for their own sake. It was about connection, about love that reaches beyond our immediate circles, about the hope that comes from knowing we're not alone in our struggles and joys. Later that night, as William read beside her and the house settled into peaceful quiet, Catherine opened her journal again. This time, Instead of analyzing problems or outlining duties, she began to write from her heart. She wrote about love in its simplest forms, the way her mother had made Christmas magical through attention rather than expense, the way William's hand in hers could calm any anxiety, the way her children's laughter could transform any difficult day into something beautiful. She wrote about the fears every parent carried, worry about their children's future, the desire to protect them from harm while teaching them to face challenges with courage. She wrote about the loneliness that could exist even in crowded rooms, about the way shared struggles could create bonds stronger than blood, about the extraordinary power of ordinary kindness. As she wrote, Catherine began to understand that her Christmas message could be something entirely different this year. Instead of speaking from a distance about grand themes, she could speak as one mother to others, as one woman who had experienced doubt and joy to others walking similar paths. She could bridge the gap between palace and people by acknowledging that the gap was smaller than anyone realized. The idea took shape slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape, where she could create something that spoke directly to the hearts of families struggling through difficult times. What if she could acknowledge the real challenges people faced while offering genuine hope based on shared human experience rather than royal privilege? Outside her window, snow continued to fall, covering the world in pristine white that seemed to promise new possibilities. Catherine closed her journal and looked out at the peaceful scene, feeling something shift inside her heart. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, more duties to fulfill in her role as Princess of Wales. But tonight, she felt the stirring of something more personal and more powerful, the desire to speak truth wrapped in love, to offer comfort that came from genuine understanding, to create a Christmas message that could truly touch the nation's heart. The foundation was being laid for something remarkable, though Catherine didn't yet fully understand the impact her developing idea would have. She only knew that this Christmas called for something different, something authentic, something that honored both her position and her humanity. The woman who would soon deliver one of the most moving royal addresses in modern history was beginning to find her voice, one honest thought at a time. The next morning brought a schedule packed with engagements that would test Catherine's growing conviction about the kind of message she wanted to share. Her first stop was Great Ormond Street Hospital, where she would spend the morning with young patients and their families. As her car pulled through the familiar gates, Catherine felt the weight of anticipation that always preceded these visits to places where courage was measured in small victories and hope lived alongside heartbreak. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the hospital's chief pediatric oncologist, greeted Catherine at the entrance. They had worked together on various initiatives over the years, and Catherine had come to deeply respect the doctor's dedication and wisdom. As they walked through the corridors decorated with colorful artwork created by young patients, Dr. Mitchell shared updates about children Catherine had met on previous visits. Emma Thompson, the little girl you met last spring, rang the bell last month, Dr. Mitchell said with evident joy. She's been cancer-free for 6 months now. Catherine's face lit up with genuine happiness. She remembered Emma, a 7-year-old with bright red curls who had shown her a drawing of her family, including a dog that didn't exist, but that Emma hoped to get when she was well enough to go home. And how is she adjusting? Catherine asked, genuinely interested in the details of the child's recovery. This was characteristic of her approach to royal engagements. While others might ask polite questions and move on, Catherine remembered names, followed up on stories, and invested emotionally in the lives she touched. Better than we hoped, the doctor replied. But her mother mentioned something interesting. She said Emma talks about you often, not because you're a princess, but because you listened to her story about wanting a dog. Emma felt like you understood what mattered to her. These words struck Catherine deeply. In a world where her every appearance was choreographed and her conversations often felt scripted, the idea that genuine listening could have such impact reminded her of the power contained in simple human connection. Their first stop was the adolescent ward, where teenagers facing serious illnesses often struggled with the additional challenge of feeling isolated from their peers. Catherine had specifically requested to spend time here, understanding that these young people needed different kinds of support than younger children. She met Marcus, a 15-year-old undergoing treatment for leukemia, who had been an accomplished footballer before his diagnosis. The young man's room was filled with get-well cards from his team, but Catherine could see the sadness in his eyes when he talked about missing the season. The hardest part isn't the treatment, Marcus told her with startling honesty. It's watching my mates move on with their lives while I'm stuck here. My mom tries to stay positive, but I know she's scared. My dad works extra shifts to pay for things insurance doesn't cover, so he's exhausted all the time. I feel like I'm not just sick, I'm making everyone else's life harder. Catherine sat down beside his bed, abandoning the formal posture her protocol training had instilled. Marcus, she said quietly, do you know what I think makes someone strong? It's not being able to play football or never being afraid. It's being able to say exactly what you just said to me. Your parents aren't working hard because it's difficult. They're working hard because you matter that much to them. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When my children are struggling with something, the last thing I want is for them to hide their feelings to protect me. What I want is to help carry whatever they're carrying. Your parents probably feel the same way. Marcus looked at her with surprise, perhaps not expecting such directness from a royal visit. But how do you handle it when you can't fix everything for your kids? The question went straight to Catherine's heart, touching on her deepest fears as a parent. I think every parent struggles with that, she admitted. We want to solve every problem and prevent every pain. But maybe the best thing we can do is show up consistently, listen without trying to fix everything, and love unconditionally through whatever comes. Their conversation continued for another 20 minutes, ranging from practical concerns about maintaining friendships during illness to deeper questions about finding purpose when life doesn't go according to plan. Catherine found herself sharing more authentically than she had in any public engagement, drawing on her own experiences as a mother and wife rather than her royal training. When it was time to move on, Marcus said something that would stay with Catherine for weeks. You know, Your Royal Highness, you talk like a real person. I mean, you obviously are a real person, but you talk like my mom or my sister. Like you get what it's like to worry about people you love. In the children's ward, Catherine met the Thompson family she had heard about earlier. Emma, now 8 and radiantly healthy, practically bounced with excitement when she saw Catherine approaching. But it was Emma's mother, Jennifer, whose reaction moved Catherine most deeply. I don't know if you remember, Jennifer began hesitantly, but when you visited Emma during her treatment, you asked about our family. You wanted to know about her older brother and how he was handling everything. Catherine did remember. Emma's brother Jake had been struggling in school, acting out because he didn't understand why his little sister was sick and why his parents were always worried. Jake's doing so much better now, Jennifer continued, her voice thick with emotion. But do you know what helped him the most? When I told him that even a princess worried about her children the same way I worried about mine. You made me feel normal in the middle of the most abnormal time of our lives. These words crystallized something Catherine had been feeling, but couldn't articulate. Her power didn't lie in her ability to offer solutions or resources, significant as those could be. Her greatest impact came from her willingness to acknowledge shared humanity, to validate experiences, and to offer the gift of understanding. Emma showed Catherine her new drawing, this one featuring a golden retriever named Princess. We got her last month, Emma explained proudly. Mom said after everything we went through, we deserve something that would make us happy every single day. The hospital visit concluded with a stop in the family room, where parents and siblings of patients gathered for support and respite. Catherine had visited this room many times, but today she saw it with fresh eyes. Here were mothers and fathers carrying impossible burdens with extraordinary grace. Here were siblings trying to understand why their family's life had suddenly become centered around hospital schedules and medical terminology. She spoke with Margaret, whose 6-month-old daughter was undergoing heart surgery. Margaret hadn't slept properly in weeks, surviving on coffee and determination while her husband managed their other 2 children at home. "I keep thinking I should be stronger," Margaret confessed. "I see other parents who seem to handle this better, who don't cry in supply closets like I do." Catherine reached for Margaret's hands. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" she asked gently. "I see someone who loves so deeply that she's willing to live in a hospital to make sure her daughter isn't alone. I see someone who's doing the hardest job in the world, being a mother when you can't control what happens next." The conversation that followed was unlike any Catherine had experienced in her royal role. Margaret shared her fears about financial stress, about her marriage surviving the crisis, about her other children feeling neglected. Catherine listened without offering platitudes or empty reassurance, instead acknowledging the reality of Margaret's struggles while affirming her strength and dedication. As Catherine prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Mitchell walked with her to the car. "I've seen many royal visits over the years," the doctor said thoughtfully, "but something's different about you lately. You're connecting with families in a way that feels more, I don't know how to put it, more real somehow." Catherine considered this observation as her car navigated London traffic toward her next appointment. She realized that her growing desire to speak authentically about family, struggle, and hope wasn't separate from her royal duties. It was perhaps the most important royal duty she could fulfill. Her afternoon engagement was a planning meeting for the annual Christmas carol service at Westminster Abbey, an event that had become one of Catherine's signature initiatives. The service traditionally honored individuals and organizations who had shown exceptional dedication to helping others throughout the year. Seated around the conference table were representatives from various charities, religious leaders, and members of her own team. The discussion focused on musical selections, readings, and the individuals who would be honored during the service. But as Catherine listened to the planning, she found herself thinking about the faces she had seen that morning. Marcus wondering how to handle fear, Emma celebrating recovery, Margaret fighting exhaustion and worry. "What if we did something different this year?" Catherine said suddenly, interrupting a discussion about traditional carols. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. "What if, instead of just celebrating the helpers, we also acknowledged the people who were struggling? What if we created space for both gratitude and honest recognition of how difficult this year has been for many families?" Canon Sarah Williams, who would be conducting the service, leaned forward with interest. "What did you have in mind, Your Royal Highness?" Catherine felt her heart racing as she articulated an idea that had been forming all day. "I've been thinking about the Christmas story itself. It's not really a story about everything going according to plan, is it? It's about finding hope and meaning in unexpected circumstances, about strangers becoming family, about love persisting through uncertainty." She paused, gathering courage for what she wanted to propose. "What if I could speak at the service? Not give a traditional royal address, but share something more personal about what Christmas means when life is difficult. I've been meeting families all year who are carrying heavy burdens with incredible grace. Maybe there's value in acknowledging that struggle is part of the human experience, not something to hide from or feel ashamed about." The room buzzed with quiet excitement and some apprehension. Royal Christmas addresses followed established protocols. Personal revelations were carefully managed. Yet everyone present could sense that Catherine was touching on something powerful and necessary. Lady Amanda Hartley, Catherine's private secretary, spoke carefully. "It's an interesting idea, Your Royal Highness. We would need to consider how such a message might be received, particularly given current economic challenges and public sentiment. But maybe that's exactly why it's needed," Catherine responded. "People aren't looking for us to pretend everything is fine. They need to know we understand that it isn't fine for many people, and that understanding doesn't diminish hope. It makes hope more real and more accessible." Canon Williams nodded thoughtfully. "There's precedent for this in Christian tradition. The most powerful Christmas messages have always been about light, appearing in darkness, about finding extraordinary meaning in ordinary struggle. If your Royal Highness is willing to speak from personal experience about these themes, it could be profoundly meaningful. The meeting continued for another hour, with Catherine sharing observations from her morning at the hospital and her growing conviction that authentic vulnerability could strengthen rather than weaken her ability to serve. By the time the session ended, the framework for a very different kind of royal Christmas message had begun to take shape. That evening, Catherine found herself in the garden with William, watching their children play in the fading light. Louis was attempting to build a snowman with Charlotte's help, while George kicked a football against the garden wall. The scene felt timeless and precious, a reminder of the simple joys that anchored every deeper purpose. "How was your day?" William asked, settling beside her on the garden bench they had installed when they first moved to Adelaide Cottage. Catherine told him about Marcus and Emma and Margaret, about the planning meeting and the ideas that were crystallizing in her mind. William listened with the attention he had always given to her thoughts and feelings, asking questions that helped her clarify her own thinking. "I think I want to do something that might be considered unconventional," she finally said. "I want to speak at the carol service about struggle and hope in ways that feel real rather than theoretical. I want to acknowledge that this Christmas will be difficult for many families while offering the kind of hope that comes from understanding rather than from distance." William was quiet for a moment, watching their children play. "Do you remember our first Christmas after we were married?" he asked eventually. "You were so nervous about getting everything right, about living up to expectations of how a royal Christmas should be." Catherine smiled at the memory. "I was terrified. I wanted everything to be perfect. But what I remember most about that Christmas was watching you with my grandmother. You asked her about her favorite Christmas memories, not as the queen, but as someone who had lived through many Christmases. And she told you about Christmases during the war, when they couldn't be sure they'd all be together the next year." Catherine remembered that conversation. Queen Elizabeth had shared stories about making do with less, about finding celebration in small gestures, about the way uncertainty had made every moment together more precious. "She said something to you that day," William continued, "about how the most important thing was being present with people, not presenting a perfect image to people. Maybe this Christmas message you're thinking about is connected to that wisdom." Their conversation was interrupted by Louis running over, his face flushed with cold and excitement. "Mummy, Daddy, look what we made." He pulled them toward a lopsided snowman, wearing one of George's scarves and a collection of sticks for arms. "He's perfect," Catherine said, kneeling to adjust the scarf. "Absolutely perfect." "He's not really perfect," Charlotte pointed out with 8-year-old logic. "His head is too big and his arms are crooked." "You're right," Catherine agreed. "But sometimes the imperfect things are the most beautiful, don't you think? This snowman shows how hard you worked together, how creative you were with what you had. That's more beautiful than perfect proportions." Later, after the children were asleep, Catherine sat at her desk again, but this time she wasn't journaling or planning. She was remembering. She thought about her own family's Christmas traditions, about the years when money was tight, but love was abundant. She remembered her grandmother's stories about Christmas during rationing, when orange in a stocking was a treasure and being together was gift enough. She thought about the mothers she had met over the years whose children were fighting serious illnesses, who found ways to create Christmas magic in hospital rooms. She thought about families separated by military deployment, about elderly people spending Christmas alone, about parents working multiple jobs to provide for their children's dreams. And she thought about the incredible resilience, creativity, and love she had witnessed in the face of these challenges. People didn't need her to minimize their struggles or to pretend that positive thinking could solve real problems. They needed her to witness their strength, to acknowledge their pain, and to affirm that their experiences mattered. The message that would soon touch millions of hearts was taking shape, not from royal training or protocol guidance, but from the accumulated wisdom of genuine encounters with extraordinary, ordinary people. Catherine was beginning to understand that her greatest gift to the nation might be her willingness to speak not as a princess to subjects, but as one human being to others, sharing the universal experiences that connect every heart. The week leading up to the Westminster Abbey carol service brought an intensity Catherine had never experienced in her royal career. Word had leaked to the press that she planned to deliver a personal address, and speculation filled the newspapers and social media. Some praised the apparent departure from traditional royal messaging, while others questioned whether such innovation was appropriate during challenging times. Catherine tried to avoid reading the commentary, but snippets reached her anyway. Princess Catherine to break royal protocol with emotional Christmas speech, read one headline. Another asked, "Is the royal family ready for radical honesty?" The attention made her second-guess herself, wondering if her instincts were leading her towards something beneficial or potentially damaging. 3 days before the service, she received an unexpected phone call from an elderly woman named Rose Patterson. Rose had somehow obtained Catherine's private secretary's number and insisted that her message was important enough to reach the princess directly. Intrigued and moved by the woman's determination, Catherine agreed to take the call. "Your Royal Highness," Rose began, her voice trembling slightly with age and emotion, "I hope you don't mind my calling. I'm 87 years old, and I've been reading about your Christmas message. I wanted to tell you something that might help." Catherine settled into her favorite chair, prepared to listen. There was something in Rose's voice that commanded attention. "I lost my husband last Christmas Eve," Rose continued. "We've been married 62 years. This will be my first Christmas alone, and I've been dreading it. My children live far away, and while they love me, they have their own families to tend to. I've been feeling quite sorry for myself, if I'm honest." Catherine's heart went out to this stranger who had chosen to share such intimate pain. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Rose. That must be incredibly difficult." "It is," Rose acknowledged. "But here's what I wanted to tell you. Yesterday, I was reading about your plans to speak honestly about struggle and hope. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in my sadness. The idea that someone in your position understands that Christmas can be hard, that it's acceptable to acknowledge grief alongside celebration. Well, it gave me permission to stop pretending I'm fine." Rose paused, and Catherine could hear her taking a shaky breath. "I called my daughter yesterday and told her how I was really feeling instead of insisting I was managing beautifully. It turned out she'd been worried about me, but didn't know how to help. We're making new plans for Christmas now, something that honors both my grief for her father and our love for each other." Catherine found herself deeply moved by Rose's courage in reaching out. "Rose, what you've just told me, that's exactly why I feel called to speak differently this year. So many people are carrying heavy things and feeling like they have to carry them alone." "Exactly," Rose said with growing strength in her voice. "If you don't mind me saying, Your Royal Highness, the royal family has always represented endurance and duty, which has been comforting. But now we need to hear that even people with beautiful lives struggle sometimes, that struggle doesn't mean failure, and that reaching out for connection isn't weakness." After ending the call, Catherine sat quietly in her study, profoundly grateful for Rose's courage and wisdom. This was precisely what she hoped to accomplish, creating space for authentic experience within the framework of hope and community. That evening, she shared Rose's call with William, who had become her closest counselor as she prepared for the carol service address. They walked through the gardens of their home, their breath visible in the cold December air, while the children played inside with their grandmother, who had come for dinner. "I keep thinking about the responsibility of this," Catherine confided. "What if speaking honestly about struggle makes people feel worse instead of better? What if I get the tone wrong?" William stopped walking and turned to face her. "Catherine, do you remember what you told me after George was born? You said you felt overwhelmed and unprepared, that you loved him more than you thought possible, but were terrified you weren't enough for him." Catherine smiled at the memory of those early, intense days of motherhood. "I was a mess those first few weeks. You were human, William corrected gently. And when you finally talked to other mothers about how you were feeling, what happened? I discovered I wasn't alone. Other women had felt the same way, even women who seemed to have everything figured out. Sharing that struggle actually brought us closer together. That's what you're offering to the nation, William said. Not solutions to every problem, but the recognition that struggling doesn't make someone deficient. It makes them human. 2 days before the carol service, Catherine attended her final preparatory meeting with Canon Williams and the service coordinators. They reviewed the order of worship, the musical selections, and the timing for her address. But Catherine found herself focusing on something else entirely. I want to make sure we've thought about the audience beyond those who will be physically present, she said. The service will be broadcast, and people will be watching from hospital beds, from care homes, from living rooms where they're dealing with unemployment or grief or family conflict. How do we make sure they feel included rather than excluded by what we create? Canon Williams nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right question. In the Christmas story, the message came first to shepherds, people on the margins, working through the night, probably not expecting to be included in anything significant. Perhaps your address should acknowledge that the most important truths often reveal themselves to people who feel overlooked. This perspective helped Catherine clarify the tone she wanted to achieve. Rather than speaking from a position of privilege about others' struggles, she wanted to speak from a recognition of shared humanity, acknowledging that everyone carried something difficult while also carrying something beautiful. The night before the carol service, Catherine experienced what she would later describe as the most significant conversation of her preparation period. She was putting Charlotte to bed when her daughter asked an unexpectedly profound question. "Mummy, are you nervous about tomorrow?" Catherine considered how to answer honestly without burdening her 8-year-old with adult anxieties. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm a little nervous." "Why do you ask?" "Well," Charlotte said thoughtfully, "you seem different lately. Like you're thinking about big things more than usual." The observation surprised Catherine with its accuracy. "You're very perceptive. I have been thinking about big things. I'm going to talk tomorrow about how families can be strong together even when things are difficult." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, then said something that took Catherine's breath away. "Like when you and Daddy had to have serious talks about Grandpa Charles being sick. You were sad, but you still took care of us, and we felt safe even though you were worried." Catherine realized her daughter had witnessed exactly what she hoped to convey in her address, that acknowledging struggle doesn't diminish strength, and that families can hold both sorrow and love simultaneously. "That's exactly right," Catherine said softly. "Sometimes being strong means letting people see when you're worried or sad, because it helps them understand they don't have to hide their feelings either." "Will you tell people that tomorrow?" Charlotte asked. "I think I will," Catherine replied, understanding that her daughter had just helped her find the heart of her message. The morning of the carol service dawned clear and cold, with brilliant winter sunshine streaming through the windows of Westminster Abbey. Catherine arrived early for final preparations, walking through the magnificent space while it was still empty and peaceful. She paused before the tomb of the unknown warrior, thinking about all the families throughout history who had celebrated Christmas while carrying uncertainty about loved ones' safety, who had found ways to honor both grief and hope. As guests began arriving, Catherine felt a mixture of nervousness and deep calm. She had spent weeks preparing, but ultimately she knew that her message would succeed or fail based on its authenticity rather than its polish. She thought about Rose Patterson, about Marcus at the hospital, about Margaret in the family room, about her own children's questions about fairness and struggle. The Abbey filled with a remarkable cross-section of people. Members of the royal family, political leaders, healthcare workers, teachers, charity volunteers, and families who had shown extraordinary resilience in the face of challenges. Catherine had specifically requested this diverse guest list, wanting the service to reflect the full spectrum of British society. As the service began, Catherine found herself truly present in a way she rarely experienced during royal engagements. The music moved her deeply, particularly a performance by a children's choir from a school in a disadvantaged area of London. Their voices soared through the ancient space, pure and powerful, carrying both the pain and hope of their communities. When the time came for her address, Catherine approached the lectern with steady steps. She looked out at the congregation, seeing faces that represented every kind of human experience. In the front rows sat members of her family, their presence a reminder of the love that grounded everything else. Further back, she spotted healthcare workers still tired from long shifts, teachers who had gone above and beyond for their students, and volunteers who had quietly served their communities throughout a difficult year. Catherine began to speak, her voice clear and warm, carrying easily through the Abbey and to the millions listening at home. She spoke about Christmas as a time when light appears in darkness, not by eliminating the darkness, but by proving it doesn't have the final word. She talked about the families she had met who had transformed crisis into connection, who had discovered that asking for help strengthened rather than weakened their bonds. She shared her own experiences as a mother navigating uncertainty, as a wife supporting a husband through family challenges, as a daughter watching parents age, as a woman learning that perfect appearances mattered far less than genuine presence. Her words created a bridge between the extraordinary circumstances of royal life and the universal experiences of love, loss, worry, and hope that touch every family. Most powerfully, Catherine spoke directly to those who might be spending Christmas in hospitals, care homes, or situations of loneliness or financial stress. She acknowledged their struggles without minimizing them, affirmed their strength without dismissing their pain, and offered hope grounded in the reality of human resilience rather than empty optimism. This Christmas, she said, her voice growing stronger as she reached the heart of her message, may we remember that the most profound gifts we can offer each other are our authentic presence, our willingness to listen without judgment, and our recognition that every person carries both struggles and strengths that deserve to be seen and honored. As Catherine spoke these words, something remarkable happened in the Abbey. The formal atmosphere that typically characterized royal events began to shift. People leaned forward, tears appeared in eyes that rarely showed emotion in public, and a sense of genuine connection spread through the congregation like warmth from a hearth. The address concluded with Catherine sharing a prayer her own grandmother had taught her about finding grace in ordinary moments and courage for whatever comes next. As she returned to her seat, the silence that followed felt sacred rather than empty, filled with the kind of recognition that occurs when someone speaks truth that listeners have been waiting to hear. The rest of the carol service proceeded with unusual power and beauty. The music seemed more meaningful, the readings more relevant, and the prayers more heartfelt. People who had attended hundreds of royal events would later describe this service as uniquely moving, not because of its grandeur, but because of its authenticity. As the service concluded and guests began to leave, Catherine was approached by person after person wanting to share how her words had affected them. A nurse from the pediatric ward at a London hospital thanked her for acknowledging the difficulty of caring for others while managing personal struggles. A single father working 2 jobs to support his children said he felt seen and valued in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Most memorably, an elderly gentleman approached with tears in his eyes. "Your Royal Highness," he said quietly, "my wife has been in a care home with dementia for 3 years. This is my first Christmas without her at home, and I've been feeling guilty for being sad during what should be a joyful season. Your message gave me permission to miss her while still finding moments of gratitude. Thank you for making room for complicated feelings." These encounters confirmed for Catherine that her instinct to speak authentically had been correct. People didn't need her to have perfect answers or to minimize real challenges. They needed to feel understood, to know that their struggles were valid, and to be reminded of their own strength and the strength available through connection with others. As Catherine left Westminster Abbey that evening, she felt a profound sense of completion and beginning simultaneously. She had delivered the message her heart had been preparing for months, speaking truth wrapped in love to a nation that had been waiting for exactly this kind of honesty from their future queen. In the days following the Westminster Abbey carol service, Catherine experienced something unprecedented in her years as a member of the royal family. The response to her address was immediate, overwhelming, and deeply personal. Within hours of the broadcast, Kensington Palace's phone lines were flooded with calls from people wanting to share their own stories, their gratitude, and their sense of connection to the message they had heard. Catherine's private secretary, Lady Amanda Hartley, had worked in royal households for over 2 decades but had never encountered anything like the volume and emotional intensity of the correspondence that began arriving. Letters came from every corner of the United Kingdom and beyond, written by hand on tear-stained paper, typed on computers in the middle of sleepless nights, and dictated to helpful friends and family members. "Your Royal Highness," Lady Amanda said during their morning briefing, "we've received over 10,000 pieces of correspondence in just 3 days. The letters are unlike anything I've seen in royal service. People are sharing deeply personal stories, and many are asking if there's a way to continue the conversations your address began." Catherine requested to read a representative sample of the letters herself, understanding that this response represented something far more significant than typical royal fan mail. What she discovered moved her to tears and strengthened her conviction that authentic communication could bridge seemingly impossible divides. From a mother in Manchester: "Your Royal Highness, I've been struggling with depression since my youngest son was diagnosed with autism 2 years ago. I love him desperately, but I felt like a failure because I couldn't fix his challenges or make his path easier. Your words about strength, sometimes meaning letting others see our struggles, gave me courage to finally ask for help. I started therapy this week." From a retired teacher in Scotland: "I lost my husband 6 months ago and have been pretending to be fine because I didn't want to burden my adult children with my grief. After hearing your address, I called my daughter and told her how lonely I've been. She immediately invited me to spend Christmas with her family, and we cried together for the first time since the funeral." From a young father in Northern Ireland: "I've been out of work for 8 months, and my wife and I've been arguing about money constantly. We were both too proud to admit how scared we were. Your message about families being stronger when they face challenges together helped us finally talk honestly. We're making a plan together instead of suffering separately." Catherine read letter after letter, each one representing a life touched by the simple recognition that struggle and strength could coexist, that asking for help was an act of courage rather than defeat. She began to understand that her Christmas message had accomplished something far beyond what she had imagined. It had given people permission to be human in a world that often demanded perfection. The media response was equally remarkable, though more complex. Traditional royal correspondents struggled to categorize Catherine's address, which didn't fit established patterns of royal communication. Some praised her courage and authenticity, calling it a watershed moment for the monarchy's relationship with the people. Others questioned whether such personal revelation was appropriate for someone in her position. However, the response from mental health organizations, family support charities, and healthcare professionals was universally positive. Dr. James Morrison, director of the UK's largest mental health charity, issued a statement saying, "The Princess of Wales has done more to destigmatize emotional struggle and help-seeking in one 20-minute address than most public awareness campaigns achieve in years." Catherine found herself particularly moved by a letter from Dr. Sarah Mitchell at Great Ormond Street Hospital. "Your Royal Highness," the doctor wrote, "in the week since your address, we've seen a significant increase in parents asking for psychological support services. More importantly, they're asking without shame, explaining that they heard someone they respect acknowledge that needing help is normal and healthy." 10 days after the carol service, Catherine made an unscheduled visit to a family support center in East London. The center provided resources for families dealing with various challenges: single parents, families with disabled children, those facing financial hardship, and people caring for elderly relatives. Catherine had visited similar facilities many times, but this visit felt different from the moment she arrived. The center's director, Maria Santos, greeted Catherine with unusual warmth. "Your Royal Highness, I have to tell you that your Christmas message has changed the atmosphere here. Families are coming in and immediately sharing what they're really dealing with instead of spending weeks building up trust. They're saying, if the princess can talk about struggle being normal, then maybe I can too." Catherine spent the morning in various support groups, listening to conversations that had an openness and honesty she had rarely encountered in formal settings. In the single parents group, she met Jennifer, a young mother who had left an abusive relationship and was rebuilding her life with her two small children. "I heard your address on Christmas Eve," Jennifer told Catherine. "I was feeling like such a failure because I couldn't give my kids the Christmas I wanted to. But when you talked about love being more important than perfect presentations, something shifted for me. We had the most beautiful Christmas morning just being together." In the carer support group, Catherine met David, a man in his 50s who had given up his career to care for his mother with dementia and his adult son with severe disabilities. "I've been running on fumes for 3 years," he admitted. "Your message about asking for help being an act of love rather than weakness finally convinced me to accept respite care services. It's making all the difference." These encounters reinforced for Catherine that authentic leadership required ongoing engagement rather than single gestures. The response to her Christmas message had created an opportunity for deeper connection and more meaningful support, but only if she continued to prioritize genuine communication over traditional protocols. That afternoon, Catherine made a decision that surprised even her closest advisors. She asked to convene a meeting with representatives from mental health organizations, family support services, and community groups to explore how to build on the momentum created by her Christmas address. The meeting took place 2 weeks later in a community center in Birmingham, chosen specifically because it represented the kind of grassroots organization Catherine wanted to support and learn from. Around the table sat social workers, charity directors, healthcare professionals, and, most importantly, people with lived experience of the challenges Catherine had addressed. "I want to understand how we can move beyond just talking about these issues to creating real, sustainable support," Catherine began. "Your Christmas message gave people permission to be honest, but now they need actual resources and community." What emerged from this meeting was unprecedented in royal charitable work, a collaborative initiative that would bring together existing organizations under a new framework focused on family resilience and community connection. Rather than creating another royal charity, Catherine proposed using her platform to amplify the work already being done by community organizations while providing additional resources and reducing bureaucratic barriers. The initiative, tentatively called Together Through Everything, would focus on 3 core principles Catherine had identified through her year of listening and learning: normalizing the experience of struggle, strengthening community connections, and ensuring that help seeking was accessible and dignified. Sarah Chun, director of a family support network in Manchester, raised an important concern. "This kind of work requires long-term commitment, Your Royal Highness. It's not about ribbon cuttings and photo opportunities. It's about showing up consistently, especially when the initial enthusiasm fades." Catherine nodded seriously. "That's exactly what I want to commit to. This isn't about adding another item to my royal calendar. This is about fundamentally changing how I approach my role, making authentic connection and practical support the center of everything I do." Meanwhile, the impact of Catherine's Christmas message continued to ripple through British society in unexpected ways. Schools reported increases in parents reaching out for support with children's mental health concerns. Workplaces began implementing more comprehensive employee assistance programs. Even government officials referenced Catherine's words when discussing policy approaches to family support and mental health services. Most significantly, The message had prompted conversations in families across the country about topics that had previously been considered too difficult or too private to discuss openly. Marriage counselors, family therapists, and support group facilitators all noted increases in people seeking help while citing Catherine's words about strength and vulnerability. Rose Patterson, the elderly woman who had called Catherine before the carol service, sent another letter describing how her honest conversation with her daughter had led to a complete transformation of their relationship. "We're closer now than we've been since she was a child," Rose wrote. "Sharing my grief over losing her father allowed her to share her own fears about aging parents and how to balance caring for me with caring for her own family. We're helping each other instead of protecting each other from reality." 3 weeks after the Christmas address, Catherine received a letter that would influence her royal work for years to come. It came from Marcus, the teenage footballer she had met at Great Ormond Street Hospital. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus wrote, "I wanted to tell you that I'm in remission and back at school. But more than that, I wanted to thank you for the conversation we had about strength meaning different things than I thought. I've started a support group at school for kids dealing with serious health issues. We call ourselves the Real Strength Club because we decided that real strength is being honest about what's hard and helping each other through it." Marcus's letter included a photo of his support group, 12 teenagers of various backgrounds, all wearing t-shirts that said Real Strength, and all smiling with the kind of joy that comes from being truly seen and understood. Catherine kept this photo on her desk as a daily reminder of the power contained in authentic connection. As spring approached, Catherine reflected on the journey that had begun with her quiet morning in the kitchen, watching snow fall while questioning how to use her platform more meaningfully. The Christmas message that had started as an impulse toward honesty had evolved into a fundamental shift in how she understood her role as a future queen. The traditional model of royal service had emphasized duty, dignity, and maintaining appropriate distance from subjects' personal struggles. Catherine had discovered something different, that true service might require vulnerability, that dignity could be enhanced rather than diminished by acknowledging shared humanity, and that the most appropriate distance between royalty and people was no distance at all when it came to the universal experiences of love, loss, fear, and hope. On a warm April morning, Catherine stood once again at her kitchen window, but this time she wasn't questioning her purpose. She was planning her next steps in work that had become deeply fulfilling. The Together Through Everything initiative was launching in 6 pilot communities, with Catherine committed to spending 1 week each month working directly with local organizations rather than making ceremonial visits. The children's voices echoed through the house as they prepared for school, and William called from upstairs asking if she had seen his blue tie. These ordinary moments remained the foundation of everything else, but they no longer felt separate from her royal work. Instead, her experiences as a mother, wife, and daughter informed every aspect of her service, making her more rather than less effective in her public role. Her phone buzzed with a text from her private secretary about the day's schedule, a visit to a new family support center in Liverpool, followed by a meeting with social workers about expanding mental health services in schools. Instead of feeling daunting, these engagements felt like natural extensions of conversations she had been having all her adult life. Catherine had learned that the most powerful gift she could offer wasn't her royal title or the resources that came with it, though those certainly mattered. Her greatest gift was her willingness to acknowledge that struggles and strengths lived side by side in every life, that asking for help was an act of wisdom rather than weakness, and that authentic connection could bridge any divide created by circumstance, class, or position. As she prepared to leave for Liverpool, Catherine paused to reread one more letter from her growing collection of correspondence. This one came from a grandmother in Wales who had heard Catherine's Christmas message while visiting her grandson in the hospital where he was receiving treatment for leukemia. "Your Royal Highness," the letter read, "you gave me word for something I couldn't express. You helped me understand that being strong for my grandson didn't mean hiding my own fears and sadness. It meant showing him that people who love each other can carry difficult things together. He's doing well now, but more than that, Our whole family has learned how to be honest with each other about the hard things and the beautiful things at the same time. Thank you for teaching us that both can be true." Catherine smiled as she folded the letter and placed it back in a box where she kept these treasured communications. Each letter represented not just a life touched by her words, but a reminder of the profound responsibility and privilege of authentic leadership. Her Christmas message had touched the nation not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And in a world that often demanded perfection, reality had proven to be the most revolutionary and healing gift she could offer. The woman who had once worried about getting everything right had discovered something far more important: the power of getting things honest. And in that discovery, Catherine had found not just her voice as a future queen, but her purpose as a human being committed to serving others with the fullness of her authentic self.